In this video, I'm going to show you how to use color lookup tables, also known as LUTS, to make this image look like this one. You can download this image for free in the link in the description and work along, or just pick one of your own images to follow along. So what's the question? Are you ready? It's Photoshop time, and you know the drill. Smack it, whack it, and crack-a-lack it.
Yes! That's awesome! What?
So once you have this image or your own image open in Photoshop, let's make some adjustments right away because the color lookup table will be applied at the very end of your editing process. For me, this is a perfect image that begs to be cropped to make it more powerful. Whenever you're in doubt, the image will guide you. Just ask, what is most important? I would suggest this character, this table, the costume, that's what's most important. KFC in the background is not important. This dumpster or fence, this blurry person in the foreground, none of that's important. And the photographer did use a nice shallow depth of field to minimize the distracting background, but we can still make out that's KFC, and that really detracts from the quality and mood the character is portraying. So let's get to work. I like to duplicate my layer by hitting Command or Control J. This ensures that I'm not destroying the original background copy, and I can always go back if I mess up. Now let's go ahead and crop. Crop tool is over here on the far left tool panel. You can hit C to activate it quickly, or you can come over here and click this icon. Let's toggle the ratio to 1:1. My initial impression is that a square crop would look good with this image. Okay, a square is not going to work. Do you see why? I want some negative space above the hat. Do you see how this feels just too tight against the hat? So when you're ever this tight, generally speaking, you need to crop into the forehead or the hat or the whatever, or you need to give a bit of breathing room. Not a ton, but just some. And then I would say, looking at it, I don't like that now the face is pretty much dead center in the composition. I find this little thing poking out here distracting. I'll pull it in. But what's happening is, in order to maintain that exact negative space above the subject of the image, I've got to lose the bottom of the table, and I don't like that. And as I said, I don't like that 1/3 is this fence background. So this is where you really should let the image dictate the crop. Don't be held by the restrictions of whatever ratio you had in mind. And typically most people stick to the ratio of their camera's sensor. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap the clear button. That wipes out all settings and allows me to manually adjust this however I want. So I want some of the bottom of the table. I don't want those little orange petals. I want to come over just a touch. I want to come above his hat just a touch. Maybe come in a little more. So now I have this nice leading line here, this nice leading line here. I've got some of the bottom of the table showing up, and I've got his face closer to the rule of thirds. Don't you think that looks better? I'll hit enter to accept the crop. We need to separate the subject from the background so we have individual control. Generally speaking, if you come over to the quick select tool, which is the fourth tool down, and click on it, you're going to get an option in the tool menu bar at the top that says select subject. Click that. It's amazing. It's going to look and figure out what the subject of the photograph is. Look how good that did. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's really good. And I'm already on the quick select tool, so now I can refine it by just clicking and adding to whatever it missed. It's going to have a little trouble here with that blue flower with the blue fence in the background. I want to get all of the things on the table, the entire table, all the things on the table. If your quick selection picks up too much, just hold down the Alt or Option key and it will deselect. It's a learning algorithm, so the more passes you make, the better. So what I'm going to do is just refine this selection real quick.
6.5 hours later.
Okay, once you've gotten as close as you can with the tools available here, to refine your selection, come up to Select and Mask. Hit Command or Control 0. Now your mask is most likely a reddish pink. You can set your color over here. This is most likely the general direction your mask is. But if you're selecting something where the color of your subject is too much like the red mask, just change the color of your mask to whatever is the complementary color. That's why mine was blue. I was selecting something from warm colors last time, which actually is going to work perfect for this one as well. Always toggle on Smart Radius and kind of drag the radius a bit. This tells Photoshop to look at the edges of the image selection based on the pixel. So I'm telling Photoshop right now to look at 3 pixels all the way around this image. Then choose the Refine Edge brush right here. Typically that's always auto-selected, but remember Photoshop has sticky settings that'll remember the last thing you did. Left and right bracket key to make your brush smaller or larger. Typically I try to come around this size and I put the crosshairs right on the edge of the thing that I want to keep. And I'm just going to pass over. See how it found that little stray hair? It also found that red light in the background. See this feather? But it's really great for these transparent areas like hair and fuzz and fur. There's another issue. This side. I'm going to hit Command Spacebar to zoom in. And I click and drag. Now spacebar only so I can click and move the image so I can see what's going on better. I'm going to grab the actual quick selection tool at the top, and I'm going to pass over this stem with a small brush, telling it I do want all of this. And this is just so complicated, we will need to adjust the actual mask by painting on it, but we'll get to that in a moment. I'm going to grab this stem, and once you've got it as close as you can with this feature, come over to the right side and adjust your global refinements. Typically, I like to smooth it around anywhere from 1 to 3, depending on the subject, but that's my go-to setting. Same for the feather. I usually go between 0.2 pixels and 0.8, somewhere in that range tends to work well for most of my subjects working on high-resolution files. Then come all the way down to the bottom. I don't need to decontaminate colors because I'm keeping the same subject on the same background, but I do love the output 2 choices. If you click the drop-down menu, new layer with layer mask is awesome. Here's why. Click OK. Notice what it did over here in the layers panel. It turned off my duplicated copy, created a new copy with a mask. I can option click on the mask to see it. All right, so now we see some good things and bad things. The command spacebar trick of clicking and dragging works here. Spacebar only to pan over. So we know this isn't right. Now to paint this black, if I hit B for the brush, D for default colors, and notice how black is in my foreground. Now if I come in with the normal mode right here, and I try to paint this, do you see how I'm messing it up? I'm messing up all those little fine hairs I just worked so hard to get in the Select and Mask dialog box. But here's an advanced tip. Hit Command Z to undo that. Come up to the blend mode of overlay. This whole category is about contrast. It's about making gray disappear. It's either going to push anything gray towards dark or towards light, depending on where it falls on the 50% part of the histogram. So I'm going to choose overlay. And if I have my foreground color as black, I'm at 100%. Anything that's gray is going to go to black. See how that works? I'm just clicking. Do you see how my circle is over the white? I just clicked. Didn't affect the white at all. It just cleaned up the black edges. Now, the great thing about this is you can vary your opacity. See, I'm currently at 100% opacity. I'll type the number 5 to go to 50%. You can also use this drop down and choose, or you can hover over the word and just drag. That's called a scrubby slider. But I find it quick just to use those keyboard shortcuts. A couple of clicks around the rows, a couple of clicks in here, pan down with that space bar, a couple of clicks, couple of clicks, couple of clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You see how I'm just randomly and quickly clicking where I see something that doesn't look right. Now here, actually, I'm going to Command Z that. I'm going to hit X to swap my foreground background color because now I want to make anything this gray whiter. Make sure I'm not losing anything in that area. And then here, I'm going to tap X again just to fine tune that hair. Now we know this isn't correct right here. That was that red spot it just picked up. So let's just paint that all the way away. And if you need to, you can toggle back to normal for things like that. Remember, right bracket key to make your brush bigger or left bracket key to make it smaller. It's a lot quicker than coming over to this disclosure triangle and dragging back and forth. Like, how's that? You've got to come all the way over to C. Not quite big enough. You got to drag again, come over to C. You see what I mean? So that left right bracket key is a visual, very quick visual ability to adjust that. Once you're done, hit Command or Control 0. And either option click back on the mask or just click on the eyeball and it will reload. Now, we have a great selection of just the subject. How are we going to use that? I want to make him brighter and I want to make the background darker. So I'll command click on this mask. Really, masks are just very refined selections. See how it activated the selection with the marching ants. So once you see that active selection with the marching ants, you can click on any adjustment layer and it will automatically apply that exact mask that's the current selection. I want to be able to control all the values, so I'm going to click on the curves adjustment layer, which is this third one over at the top. Do you see how that added a curves adjustment layer and it applied the exact same mask? And I basically want to make the midtones roughly brighter. So I'm going to click in the middle of the curve, which is right there, right? And it's like a dimmer switch. If you bring the dimmer switch up in any house, it's going to make it brighter. If you bring the dimmer switch down in any house, it's going to make it darker all the way to the point of turning it off. So that's all we're doing. I'm just bringing the midtones directly up just to make the midtones a touch brighter. If I think it's getting too bright up here, notice how it's a nice sloping curve. If I wanted to bring down the highlight areas, I can click here and just pull that down. Do you see how that quieted those bright highlights, but I did brighten up my subject. Now here's another powerful thing. If I come back to this and I hit Command or Control J on that curves adjustment layer, now here's the thing. What I'm going to do is I'm already selected this mask. So you can come up to Image, Adjustments, and down to Invert, or just remember to hit Command or Control I. Great keyboard shortcut. It's going to invert the mask. It's going to invert whatever you're on. It invert an image, a mask, whatever. Remember, black conceals. The B and the C are close together alphabetically, so that's how I remember it. And white reveals. That means everything on this adjustment layer, if it's black, it's going to be hidden, which means the subject's hidden. And the only thing that's happening, the only thing that can be affected is the background. And I want to do the opposite with this one. To remove points, just click on them and drag them off the screen and they disappear. Now I actually want to adjust the midpoint of the background, but I want to go the opposite direction. I want to make the background darker just to make my subject pop out just a little more. I actually want to make the background a little blurrier too. So how would I do that? I'll hit Command Option Shift letter E. That compresses everything we've done to the top layer. I'm going to hit Command or Control J again, treating this as my new original. I'm going to go up to Filter, down to Blur, and hit Gaussian Blur. Just want to dial the radius somewhere between 5 and 10 pixels. Totally depends on your image and how blurry it was before. Now here's a really good tip. Gaussian Blur is one of my favorite go-to filters. I'm going to hit Cancel. Here's why. Because if I'm actually trying to simulate lens blur, a shallower depth of field, Photoshop has a more sophisticated algorithm called lens blur. Takes a little bit longer to process, but it gives you a more realistic effect based on what a camera would do. And you can adjust how shallow the depth of field is by increasing or decreasing your radius, blade curvature, and rotation. Typically, the higher numbers, like if you're around the halfway point or 3/4 point, it's going to make it pretty blurry. And I'm just going to click OK. I always check more accurate. All right, so that looks pretty horrible, right? But what happens is we have this mask that is only affecting the background, remember? Now, to copy a mask to another layer, you have to hold down the Alt or Option key and click on the mask and drag it to that layer. And what it will do is, instead of removing it from the layer you're coming from, it actually duplicates it and copies it. Now, we see we were getting a little bit of a blur halo from the subject itself from such an extreme blur, but that's not a problem. Chances are that's going to disappear once we convert that to black and white, which is what I want to do. I'm going to hit the Gradient Map Adjustment Layer icon, the bottom right corner right here. And yeah, that little bit of halo is not as offensive as it would seem to be. If it bothers you, like in parts, like right here, here's how you fix it. Just click on the actual blurry part, type S for the clone stamp tool, which is located right here. Just hold your Alt or Option key, it gives you this bullseye, and then you want to set where you're painting from. I'm going to click here, and then it shows you in your brush circle where you're painting to. Now watch this. It shows that I'm about to paint over the subject, but I click and nothing happens, and the subject does it. Why is that? It's because we have the subject blocked by our mask. So do you see how I can remove that little halo that's right there? And I can follow this edge all the way up, and that bullseye will stay in registration with what I'm doing. I'll Alt or Option click so that I can paint down, removing that halo. A little bit of a halo over here, Alt or Option click. Follow all the way around. Compress all of that to its own layer. Now I need to clean up my layers palette. It's getting a little busy now. I'll click what I don't want. So I'm going to click this layer. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the one right above my original, select that layer, and I want to group them into a file. The quickest way to do that is just to hit Command or Control G, which is the shortcut for group. It will group them into a file. So now I can turn that off, and now I can toggle between my original cropped version and this version. Okay, I like where this is going. Now at this point, I'm ready to pop over to Adobe Camera Raw for more tweaking before I apply my LUT. So I'll go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. Now you're thinking to yourself, you didn't duplicate this new original layer, which means what I'm about to do is destructive. I can't go back and change my mind. And that is true. You either should duplicate that new compressed original that we've created, or you can convert for smart filters. What that's going to do is first it's going to ask you, do you really want to make this a re-editable smart filter? Yes, I do, please. Notice this little icon in the layers panel. It means basically whatever I do, I can always go back and undo forever. It's non-destructive method of editing. Now I'll go back to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and what do I want to do? I'm in the Basics panel here. I'd probably make sure I'm not blowing out any highlights. This is a great outfit to reveal more clarity and texture. And probably what I want to do is brighten this subject up a little. So I would use an adjustment brush for that. That's this third one down. Click it, and then you can set everything you want to do. I generally want to make this brighter. So what I'm first going to do is make it too bright, like by like a stop and a half or 2 stops. And you can release the mouse. You can change your brush size with the right bracket key or the left bracket key to steer your viewer's eye. And then at any point, it's like, okay, that's about what I want to do. However, that's a little crazy. So let's pull that exposure back down. Maybe pull the clarity up just on the subject itself. Maybe the texture just on the subject itself. Maybe I want to darken this area just a little bit in the dark tones. So I'll click Add New Adjustment Brush. Now notice that Adobe Camera Raw kept my settings as sticky settings. You can reset those by hitting Command Alt Option R. It resets all of these sliders. So now I can just dial in the blacks, pull back the shadows, come over here, and just make some of this a little darker. Remember that blurry person in the foreground? Bracket key, right bracket key to make my brush bigger, just to make that background go down just a little more. So here's where we are. And notice I can go back at any time now and change what I just did. I can toggle my eyeball on and off to see what I did. And then you have a mask that you can adjust. Like here, I've posterized the colors up here. So I'll probably click on this mask, hit B for the brush. I'm painting with black in my foreground on a white mask, right bracket key. And maybe see my opacity is at 100%. Maybe I just want to take 50% of what I did off. And it does need to be on normal. Remember the sticky settings, it's still stuck on overlay. Okay, that looks like too much. I'll hit Command and Control Z. Maybe 3 for 30%. Yeah, that's about the right flavor. It removed all that posterization I created by adding that black. Now for me, I'm bothered now by this bright area here. So I'm gonna hit Command Option Shift letter E to remove the Smart Object functionality. I'm gonna go up to the burn tool, make sure I'm on midtones, around 40%, because I want to significantly make this darker. A lot of clicking, and then I'll click the range of shadows, 2 for 20%. I just want to push this down, enough so that it's not distracting to me. Maybe right up in here. Maybe this will give me a more subtle vignette. So once you've edited your image to a black and white conversion that you enjoy, now let's finally apply those color lookup tables. You can find those down here under this icon where you get to create a new adjustment layer. Now, all of these are identical to the adjustments at the very top, which are visual icons, except for these 3. So generally, I find it much quicker just to come up to this adjustment layer. And that looks like a table, right? With all those squares. So, and if you hover over it, it tells you right there, it's a color lookup table. So just click it. It's going to add a color lookup. Whenever you add any adjustment layer, the options you have load automatically in the properties panel that auto pops up. And what you want to do is go down to 3D LUT file, hit the disclosure triangle, and then you have all these color toning methods that are used for actual movies. Let's say I want the crisp winter look. And let's say I want the crisp warm look. Let's say I want the foggy night. Well, I like the foggy night. Foggy night suits this image pretty well. Now, if you've been a follower of me, you know that I'm a big believer in achieving rich demax and good highlights without blowing out either one. And I'm also a big fan of sometimes you got to let those shadow areas block up and get totally black, because sometimes it's nice to have shadows function as a graphic element in your image. The way I would adjust it is I would just lower the opacity of what we did. Because remember, Photoshop applies everything at 100% to make sure that you see what's happening with the image. But it's like turning on a radio at 100% so you can hear the song. You know, it's too loud. So most times, almost all the time, you've got to come back to all your adjustments and soften the opacity. You've got to lower the volume to taste. I think somewhere around 59% gives me the feeling of a rich black, even though I'm sure I still don't quite perfectly have it mathematically. And remember, you can always check that by going up to Window, down to your Info panel, and then I'll choose the Move tool, so it's something smaller. And I'll just hover over what I think is black. Now, do you see on this side RGB? Remember, you know this. RGB 000 means pure black. RGB 255 means pure white. So if I hover over what I think should be black, like right here, nope, here, nope. I'm getting close. Do you see how my RGB values are close? I meant 222, which is pretty near black. It's good enough that based on the monk or white illusion, my eyeball will tell me it's black. So here's where I would stop, but you can always go back and re-edit this at any time. As long as you're on this color adjustment layer and you're on this icon, you can come up and choose whatever you want. Horror blue, that's also a nice one. For me, this particular one would need a lower opacity where it's not quite as dominant. Because remember, here's 100%. It's just too heavy-handed for my taste. I like that. So anyway, can't wait to see what you do.
Yes!
Hey, what are you still doing here? It's over. Actually, all kidding aside, I hope this video helped. And if it did, consider subscribing. I like subscribers.
That's awesome! What? You just took one in the jugular, man! Whoa! Yes! Oh my god, I did! This is...
Hey, you stayed to the end. You know what that means? You're awesome. I'm talking about you. Now get out of here.